Ezra Mbeki Johnson hadn't heard another voice in 12 years. The moon, called Kepler 442 Phi, spun slow and lonely beneath a diluted sun, its grey plains stretching beyond his window like a tired ocean. Inside the homestead, silence hummed through recycled air. The only sound came from an ancient record player looping Coltrane's Naima, its soft crackle weaving through the hum of machines. He sat at a steel table, nursing chicory coffee grown from recycled soil, and tapped a rhythm against the mug. 12 years, he muttered, voice rough from disuse. The walls didn't answer, but the rhythm did, steady, like a heartbeat refusing to quit. Ezra's hands bore the stains of work, oil, rust, hydroponic residue. He spent his days tending yams and okra inside domed gardens, and his nights adjusting power relays, fixing what time refused to leave untouched. Out here, nothing lasted without care, not even silence. Behind him, the wall was a gallery of memory, photographs of Earth, Atlanta streets, Tuskegee Airmen murals, his wife Amara laughing under summer light. A faded quilt stitched by his grandmother hung beside a djembe drum that had crossed centuries in his family line. Every object whispered heritage, anchoring him to a planet he'd never again walk. Sometimes he spoke to them, as if the memories could answer. "Morning, Ma," he'd say to the quilt. "Still holding together? Or, Amara, you'd have told me this moon needs color." His smile came slow, weary but alive. Life on the frontier wasn't glamorous. The Federation had long since forgotten this station, written it off as obsolete after the terraforming projects ended. Ezra stayed because leaving would mean surrendering what he'd built, and what he'd lost. Solitude had become his covenant, grief's final form of loyalty. But the stars don't stay silent forever. On the edge of the workbench, his receiver blinked once, then again, an amber pulse slicing through stillness. Ezra frowned. No one should be broadcasting here. He leaned closer as static hissed, then a sound rose from the speaker, layered tones, almost melodic, like mourning through metal. He straightened, heartbeat quickening. "Now what in the good Lord's name?" The signal repeated, broken but deliberate. Coordinates appeared in trembling code, 23 kilometers east. It wasn't human. No Federation protocol, no standard frequency. Ezra shut off the music and listened again. Beneath the distortion lay rhythm, patterned, emotional, something like song. "Could be debris chatter," he said aloud, though he didn't believe it. The tone carried weight, the ache of a voice searching for answer. He walked to the viewport. Outside, the pale landscape shimmered under weak sunlight. He imagined someone, or something, out there, stranded, calling across the void. The thought pressed against the quiet walls of his chest. "Not my problem," he told the empty room, trying for conviction. Yet his fingers already reached for the rover keys hanging by the door. He stopped himself. 12 years alone, and now a voice from nowhere. He could ignore it. He should. But Amara's words drifted through memory. "If you can help, Ezra, you do. That's what makes us human." He rubbed his temples, the air thick with old music and new temptation. "You're not making this easy, baby," he whispered. From the corner, Hollis, the outdated translator AI, flickered awake. "Signal origin? Unknown life signature detected? Shall I mark it hazardous?" Ezra chuckled without humor. "Mark it interesting, Hollis." "Just interesting." The receiver pulsed again, stronger this time, echoing like a heartbeat through steel. Ezra exhaled long and slow. He turned the record back on, letting Coltrane's saxophone fill the room. The melody rose, mournful yet alive, and somewhere inside that sound he felt decision stirring. "Looks like peace ain't done with me yet," he murmured. Outside, the dust swirled, carrying the faint promise of company across a moon that had forgotten conversation. Ezra listened until the record ended, then stood, eyes on the distant horizon, glowing faintly beneath the stars. He didn't know what waited out there, but for the first time in years, solitude felt less like safety, and more like a question begging for an answer. Subscribe for more human stories among the stars. The signal kept pulsing long after Ezra should have turned it off. It came at irregular intervals, each wave a tremor through the thin lunar air, low and mournful. Ezra sat before the receiver, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the blinking amber light. He hadn't heard anything so alive in years, and that was precisely what scared him. "Origin still holding steady?" he asked. "Affirmative," Hollis replied, voice rough with static. "Coordinates, Sector 12, Eastern Plain. Possible distress emission." Ezra leaned back, rubbing the scar above his eyebrow, a relic from his terraforming days. He remembered storms, dust, and the sound of alarms before silence swallowed everything. "You think it's human?" "Negative. Signal composition inconsistent with human modulation." He exhaled through his nose. "Then why does it sound like it's hurting?" Outside, the horizon shimmered under a thin blue haze. The moon's surface shifted in endless stillness, sharp ridges casting long shadows across the regolith. Ezra's rover sat near the dome, solar panels folded like tired wings. For years it hadn't moved more than a kilometer at a time. He had no reason to leave, until now. He poured himself more coffee, the recycled brew dark as space. His mind kept circling the same argument. It's none of your business. Out here, survival meant boundaries. The Federation taught that long ago. Never interfere, never risk contamination. But that law had cost him Amara. Her face returned like sunlight through clouds. "If you can help, Ezra, you help," she had said the night before the disaster. He'd promised her that. He'd failed once. The memory made his chest tighten until breathing hurt. He turned back to Hollis. "Run a proximity scan for environmental hazards. I want a full read before we move." "You are initiating travel?" Ezra hesitated. "I'm considering it." "Noted. Emotional indicators suggest a 92% probability of—" "Hollis," he interrupted. "Don't finish that sentence." Silence returned, thick as dust. He stared at the blinking light again. The signal faltered, weaker this time, like a heartbeat fading. That did it. Ezra pushed from the chair, grabbed his jacket, and sealed the front clasp. The fabric whispered against his skin. Old Federation issue, patched a dozen times but still sturdy. He walked through the homestead, double-checking power levels, securing the greenhouse valves. He paused beside Amara's quilt. The fabric caught the pale light like water. "Looks like I'm going out there again, love," he said softly. "Don't fuss, I'll be careful." By the door, the helmet waited. He lifted it slowly, feeling the weight of years pressed into its metal rim. Hollis prepped the rover. Route calculated. Estimated travel time, 2 hours, 11 minutes. Radiation risk minimal. Psychological risk minimal, Ezra cut in. "We'll call it minimal." Outside, the lunar wind howled faintly against the dome as the airlock cycled. His boots touched the dust, and gravity pulled just enough to remind him he was still tethered to something real. The rover's engine growled to life, deep and steady. He drove in silence, the land unfolding like a forgotten song. Shadows of old mining rigs jutted from the plains, reminders of a time when humans had believed expansion meant progress. Now it looked more like loneliness made permanent. Halfway to the coordinates, the signal changed pitch. It wasn't random. It pulsed in threes, long, short, long, the rhythm deliberate. Ezra frowned. "Hollis, record that pattern." Recorded. Possible communication attempt. The word sent a shiver through him. He adjusted the receiver, listening closer. Beneath the metallic hum, he thought he heard voices. Not human speech, but resonance. Layered tones vibrating in harmony. The sound carried emotion, grief, maybe hope. "Someone's still alive," Ezra murmured. As he neared the ridge marking Sector 12, his headlights caught movement, faint reflections like glass catching moonlight. He slowed the rover, heart pounding, fingers gripping the controls. Dust swirled in ghostly spirals across the plain. The signal grew louder, almost pleading now. Ezra's pulse matched its rhythm. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing against the glare. "Hollis," he whispered, "something's waiting out there." And for the first time in 12 years, fear felt like purpose. Ezra crested the ridge, just as the first pale glimmer broke through the dust. For a moment he thought his mind was playing tricks. The shimmer seemed too graceful, too deliberate. He cut the rover's engine, and silence fell thick around him. Only the faint hum of the distress signal remained, echoing like a prayer across the plains. He stepped onto the powder-grey soil, gravity pulling light against his boots. The wind stirred faint streams of dust, wrapping around the outlines ahead. Shapes, tall, slender, shimmering like molten silver under the weak sunlight. 12 figures stood motionless near the broken hull of a downed vessel. Ezra's pulse quickened. Hollis, record visual. Recording. Life signs detected. 12. Vital patterns unstable. He moved closer, each step crunching softly. The figures turned toward him as one, their movements fluid but cautious. They were unlike any species he had seen, skin translucent, rippling with subtle light like water touched by moonbeams. Their eyes, wide and reflective, carried a sorrow deeper than any words could hold. Ezra raised his hands slowly. "It's all right," he said, voice low, steady. "I'm here to help." The tallest among them tilted her head, a motion so human it pierced him. Then, from their group, a sound emerged, long, harmonic notes, haunting and layered, like a choir mourning something ancient. The sound vibrated through Ezra's chest. He whispered, "Hollis, translate." Attempting linguistic decryption, partial match detected. Communication appears tonal, emotion-based. Approximate translation, "We seek warmth, home." Ezra swallowed hard. "You found the wrong moon for warmth, ladies," he muttered, though the ache in their tone felt familiar. Too familiar. He knelt near the nearest figure. Her skin glowed faintly, but her breathing was shallow. "They're freezing," he said. "Their bodies weren't made for this cold." "Confirmed," Hollis replied. "Atmosphere composition incompatible for sustained survival." Ezra scanned the wreck behind them. The vessel's hull was cracked open like an eggshell, smoke frozen mid-drift in the thin air. Symbols were etched across the metal in curling lines, Ophiri script, ancient and elegant. He remembered reading about them decades ago, a matriarchal species known for their choral communication and communal mourning. His stomach knotted. "Ophiri widows," he murmured. "Lord, what brought y'all here?" The tall one stepped closer. Her voice, or what passed for it, was soft vibration, resonating inside his suit. He couldn't understand the words, but he felt their meaning. Plea, fear, hope. Ezra's hands trembled. 12 lives, 12 lost souls. He couldn't take them all back, not without risking everything, but leaving them meant death. Amara's voice whispered again in memory. "If you can help, Ezra, you do." He sighed, sealing the decision that would change his quiet world forever. "All right," he said, meeting their glowing eyes. "You follow me. I got a place that's still got air and heat. Not much, but it's something." The Ophiri leader inclined her head, a gesture of deep respect. Together they began moving toward the rover. Their movements were slow, graceful, like dancers learning the rhythm of new gravity. As they walked, faint hums rippled among them, harmonizing softly, carrying grief that seeped into the very dust. Inside the rover, the air grew tense with alien energy. Ezra sat at the controls, feeling their quiet presence behind him. 12 widows, survivors of something unspeakable. Hollis translated fragments of their murmurs, lost partners, broken stars, a home that burned. Ezra kept his eyes on the horizon. "You ain't the first to lose everything out here," he said quietly. "But you're safe now. Long as I'm breathing, you're safe." The tallest widow leaned forward, her luminous hand touching his shoulder, light, almost weightless. Her eyes met his, and for the first time in years, Ezra felt the pulse of belonging stir inside him. As the rover rolled back toward the homestead, dust swirling behind them like smoke from an old fire, Ezra knew solitude had just come to an end. But peace was another story waiting to be told. By the time Ezra and the 12 widows reached the homestead, the moon's horizon had dimmed to a faint violet. The outpost stood silent, its metal ribs glowing under the soft hum of solar light. As the rover sealed into the airlock, the widow stared through the glass, eyes wide, luminous, uncertain. Their bodies shimmered with exhaustion, yet there was something unbroken in their posture, dignity even in ruin. Ezra released his helmet latch, air hissing softly. "All right," he said, voice low but steady. "Welcome to my corner of nowhere." They hesitated. The tallest one, whom Ezra had silently named Seren, glanced back at the others. Her voice came as layered tones, translated seconds later by Hollis. "We bring no harm. We ask to share your warmth." Ezra nodded. "Ain't much warmth to go around, but what's here is yours." They followed him inside, one by one. The habitat's recycled air carried the faint smell of earth and metal. Plants lined the walls, okra vines, collards, tiny yam clusters, green breathing life into steel. The widows reached out curiously, their fingers glowing faintly as they brushed the leaves. "Careful with them roots," Ezra warned, a trace of pride in his tone. "Took me half a lifetime to keep these greens alive up here." One of the widows hummed softly. Hollis translated, "Living things choose to stay with you. That means trust." Ezra blinked. Ain't nobody put it like that before. He guided them to the common room. The warmth from the thermal core pulsed through the floor, soft and steady. The aliens clustered near it instinctively, absorbing heat through their translucent skin. A quiet peace settled, broken only by the low thrum of machinery. Ezra fetched blankets, old ones he'd kept from Earth, worn but clean. He draped them over the closest figures. "These ain't much, but they'll do till we figure something better." Seren watched him, eyes reflecting the glow of the heater. "You act as one who has buried sorrow," the translation said. Ezra paused mid-motion. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Guess I have." No one spoke after that. Instead, the widows began to hum, a sound unlike anything Ezra had heard. It wasn't a song exactly, more like breath shaped into light. Notes rose and fell in harmony with the pulse of the heater, turning the cold metal room into something sacred. The vibrations slid beneath his skin, stirring places long dormant. He sat back in his chair, head tilted, eyes half closed. The melody seemed to braid itself with memory. Amara's laughter, his father's trumpet, the streets of old Atlanta shimmering after rain. When the sound faded, he exhaled slowly, almost afraid to speak. "That," he said softly, "was something holy." Seren inclined her head. "It is morning," came the translation, "and also hope." Ezra nodded, throat tight. "Both of those I understand." For the next few hours, he worked to adjust the oxygen mix and humidity, calibrating the filters until Hollis confirmed stability. He moved methodically, trying not to think about the implications of what he'd just done, harboring unknown beings, violating Federation protocol. But as he watched the widows rest, their faint light painting soft patterns on the walls, he knew he couldn't have done otherwise. They looked fragile, yet there was strength in their stillness, a quiet endurance that mirrored his own. He brewed coffee for himself, and on a whim placed small cups of warmed water before them. "'Tain't coffee, but it's something warm." One of the widows touched the cup and her skin brightened faintly. Hollis murmured, "They call this gesture a promise of life shared." Ezra smiled. "Then let's call it dinner." He leaned back, hands folded, the hum of the heater and their low harmonies weaving through the air. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. Still, as the lunar night deepened and the widows slept, Ezra stared at the stars beyond the glass, unease threading through gratitude. The galaxy had just reminded him that peace was always temporary, and connection always came with cost. Morning came in pale gold streaks through the dome. Ezra stood by the greenhouse window, watching faint light touch the leaves. The widows had gathered in silence around the heater, their luminous forms curled like petals at rest. For the first time since their arrival, the homestead felt alive in a way he hadn't known it could, full of quiet breathing, subtle warmth, and the faint hum of alien harmony that seemed to seep into the walls. He brewed his coffee slowly, savoring the ritual. The smell filled the air, dark and earthy. Behind him, soft movement stirred. The widows waking. One of them approached the counter, curious. Her fingers brushed the steam, light shimmering across her translucent skin. "It's called coffee," Ezra said, glancing over his shoulder. "Keeps you steady when the world's trying to tilt." She tilted her head, eyes reflecting the amber liquid. Hollis translated her tone as wonder. "You drink warmth." Ezra smiled. "Every morning." When he turned back, Seren stood near the old record player. She pointed to the worn vinyl leaning against it. "This is the sound that holds your memory." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, that's kind of blue, Miles Davis. My father played trumpet back on Earth. He said jazz was how we turned pain into something worth listening to." Seren's hand rested over her chest. "We have the same word," the translator murmured. "We call it morning song." Ezra set the cup down. "Then maybe it's time we share a little music." He lifted the needle. The record spun, crackling softly before a smooth trumpet filled the room. The widows froze, heads tilted as if the sound itself carried shape and texture. Slowly their luminous throats began to glow. Low notes, harmonic, wordless, rose in response. The two melodies entwined, human and alien voices, weaving grief and grace into something new. Ezra sat, eyes closed. He felt Amara there, her laughter between notes, her warmth in the rhythm. The air thickened with memory, and for the first time in 12 years, the ache didn't feel like punishment. It felt like prayer. When the final note faded, Seren spoke. "Our people sing when the stars die," came the translation. "You sing when hearts break." Both songs ask the same thing, to remember. Ezra's voice came out rough. "Then we understand each other better than I thought." The widows exchanged glances, soft light pulsing between them. Hollis processed their tones. "They wish to share their morning ritual with you." Ezra hesitated. "I'm not much for ceremonies." Seren's gaze held steady. "You already live one." He sighed, setting his mug aside. "All right then. Show me how you grieve." They formed a circle on the floor, their light dimming until only faint silver traced their outlines. From the center, Seren poured a small vial of shimmering dust, ash, maybe memory. The others began to hum in unison, vibrations low enough to rattle the floor. The sound filled the air, not loud but vast, like the breath of something older than words. Ezra closed his eyes and let the rhythm sink into him. Without thinking, he reached for the djembe drum in the corner. The first strike was hesitant, the second stronger, until his hands found the pattern his father once taught him. Drum and harmony merged, alien resonance meeting human heartbeat. When the hum ceased, silence settled thick as dawn fog. The widows opened their eyes. Faint trails of light marked the floor like constellations. Seren whispered through the translator, "Grief shared is less heavy." Ezra nodded, voice barely steady. "You're right about that." He turned toward the kitchen, his stomach rumbling. "Now, if you all don't mind, I'm going to show you something better than ashes and sadness, gumbo." The widows watched as he pulled out jars of okra and dried shrimp. The translator captured their amusement, calling the act a feast against sorrow. Ezra chuckled softly. "That's exactly what it is." As the pot simmered, the scent filled the room, earthy and rich. The widows hummed again, lighter now, almost joyful. Ezra smiled into the steam. He didn't know what they'd faced before crashing here, but for the first time since their arrival, laughter, or something like it, moved through the air. And yet beneath that warmth, a faint pulse of static whispered from the receiver, one the old man didn't notice. A signal had begun to stir again, carrying news from far beyond this fragile peace. The message came 3 days after the widow's song. Ezra found it blinking on his comboard, Federation's seal flickering like a cold eye in the dark. He stood over it for a long time before opening the channel. The voice that emerged was clipped, official, and utterly devoid of soul. "Station Operator Ezra Mbeki Johnson. This is Central Command, Outer Colonies Division. We have detected unauthorized life signatures at your registered location. Confirm presence of non-human entities immediately." Ezra's stomach tightened. He took a slow breath. This is Johnson. Yeah, I got guests. Shipwrecked. Survivors. 12 of them. Unregistered species are to be reported for containment and transfer. You are in violation of Interstellar Regulation 9-7. Hold on. His voice cut sharp. They're not prisoners. They needed shelter and I gave it. That's all. Static filled the silence, followed by a colder tone. Failure to comply will result in disciplinary action, including termination of habitation rights. Ezra stared at the speaker. You ever lost somebody? He asked quietly. You ever seen what loneliness does to a soul? These women lost everything, and you want to box them up like samples. The voice didn't answer. The line went dead. Behind him the widows had gathered. Their skin shimmered faintly, light pulsing with concern. Hollis translated their harmonic murmurs. Danger approaches. You risk your place. Ezra rubbed a hand over his face. My place ain't worth much if I gotta trade my humanity to keep it. Saren stepped forward, her eyes soft but firm. You would defy your own people for strangers? Ezra looked around the homestead, the quilt on the wall, the djembe, the half-grown green swaying under UV light. I would, he said simply, because my people taught me that strangers become kin when you share your hearth. The widows hummed low, tones of gratitude and sorrow blending together. Then we stand beside you, Hollis translated. Ezra sank into his chair, exhaustion pressing on him. Let's hope standing's all we gotta do. For the next 2 days, he fortified the outpost, not with weapons, but with words. He spent hours drafting a transmission to the Federation Council, citing historical precedents, quoting old Earth law, hospitality clauses, humanitarian exemptions, he muttered as he typed. For you bureaucrats forgot where we came from. He paused, glancing at the widows as they tended the greenhouse. Their delicate fingers moved with care, adjusting soil moisture, humming softly to the plants. The air felt different now, full of shared rhythm. That night, when the stars burned sharp above the dome, Ezra transmitted his appeal. His voice, deep and calm, carried conviction forged from generations of endurance. To whoever's listening at Central Command, he began, this is Ezra Mbeki Johnson, former Terraform Corps. I'm reporting 12 survivors from an Ophiri vessel, destroyed by meteor impact. They pose no threat. They seek only safety. Humanity didn't cross the stars to forget its soul. If compassion's a crime, then write my name on the list. He ended the message there, no fancy words, no apology, just truth. When he turned, the widows were watching. Seren approached, her light dim but steady. Your words carry heat, Hollis said through her tone. Heat is life. Ezra chuckled softly. Where I'm from, we call that fire. They shared silence that didn't need translation. The kind born of respect. Hours later, the reply came. Short, bureaucratic, threatening. Your defiance has been logged. Expect inspection within standard cycle. Ezra leaned back, laughing once under his breath. Inspection, huh? Guess I better sweep the floor. But beneath the humor, worry coiled deep. The Federation didn't send inspectors, they sent enforcers. He poured himself another cup of coffee, the bitter taste grounding him. Outside, dust drifted across the barren plain. The widows stood together near the glass, their glow reflected in the dark. Ezra joined them, shoulders squared, voice low. Whatever comes, he said, we face it together. There ain't no paperwork strong enough to break that. And though none of them spoke, the silence that followed was filled with promise, and the faint, distant hum of engines that didn't belong to the moon. Ezra couldn't sleep that night. The Federation's warning echoed through his thoughts, cold as the void outside. He sat by the greenhouse, where the faint glow of a fiery light shimmered over the leaves. The widows rested quietly, their breathing a slow rhythmic hum. The sound reminded him of trains passing through Atlanta when he was a boy, steady, inevitable, carrying stories from somewhere else. He closed his eyes, and memory came for him. He was 16 again, standing in his father's garage while an old trumpet wailed from the corner speaker. Sweat, brass polish, and oil filled the air. His father, Benjamin Johnson, leaned over the workbench, building a model rocket from scrap metal. Everything we send up there, he said, ought to carry something of us. Don't ever forget that. Young Ezra had laughed. You mean music? I mean heart, Benjamin said, tapping his chest. They can take your name off a door, son, but they can't take that. That was the lesson Ezra carried into adulthood, the one that made him join the Terraform Corps, the one that made him stay on this forgotten moon. But now, surrounded by silence that no song could fill, he wondered if he'd mistaken endurance for purpose. A soft light moved beside him. Seren approached, her steps quiet. Hollis translated her tones. You are not resting. Ezra smiled faintly. Never been much good at that. You think of your home. Yeah, he said. Earth. A blue ball full of sound and soul. My mama used to cook on Sundays. Gumbo, cornbread, jazz on the radio. You could smell comfort before you even walked through the door. Seren tilted her head, fascinated. We remember our homes by color, came Hollis's voice. You remember yours by flavor. Ezra chuckled. Guess we both got our ways. She looked toward the window. Your stars and ours, different, yet they shine the same. Her words settled into him, quiet but firm. He thought about how long humans had traveled, spreading across the galaxy, but how few had carried their roots intact. Culture, he realized, wasn't just memory, it was survival. He stood stretching, his joints popping in protest. You ever lose something so deep it feels like gravity? Seren's glow dimmed slightly. We lost our bonded ones. We sing so we do not fall into silence. Ezra nodded slowly. On Earth we called that the blues. Her tone shifted to a low hum, a sound halfway between a sigh and a song. Then we share the same language. They stood together watching the stars. For a long while there was no need for words. Later, when the widows slept again, Ezra dug through an old crate in the storage bay. He pulled out a worn photograph, him and Amara standing on the steps of Morehouse Station before launch. Her smile, radiant and fearless, filled the frame. Beneath it lay a folded letter, her handwriting looping and elegant. Don't let the work make you forget to live, love. You build worlds, but don't forget your own heart. He traced the ink with a trembling hand. Still hearing you, baby, he whispered. A faint hum rose from behind. The widows were dreaming again, their bioluminescence pulsing in rhythm. He realized their glow wasn't random. It was syncopated, structured like a heartbeat, like jazz. For a moment it felt as though the universe itself was keeping time with his memories. He whispered, My daddy said home ain't a place, it's a people. He looked at them, gathered in quiet harmony. Maybe that's what I'm building again. Outside the stars seemed closer, less like distant cold fires and more like streetlights guiding him home. As he drifted finally into uneasy sleep, one thought anchored him. If the Federation came tomorrow, he would stand firm. Not out of duty, but because these 12 beings had reminded him what humanity truly meant. And somewhere beyond the silence, a faint pulse answered, as if the universe agreed. By the next sunrise, the quiet hum of the homestead broke beneath a foreign frequency. Ezra froze mid-step as Hollis's voice crackled through the speakers. Incoming vessel detected. Transponder ID, Federation Enforcement Unit 7. He muttered a curse under his breath. They didn't waste time. The widows gathered behind him, their light flickering with tension. Serene's tone resonated low, the translator shaping her worry into words. They come to take us? Ezra didn't answer right away. He tightened his jacket, eyes locked on the blinking alert. They'll try. But I'll do the talking. When the transmission came through, the voice was human, crisp, professional, and impatient. Operator Johnson, this is Commander Hayes of the Federation Council. You are ordered to grant us access for inspection. Prepare for entry and identification. Ezra pressed the comm. This isn't a military outpost, Commander. It's my home. You want to talk? We talk like folks. Static. Then coldly, open your doors or we breach them. Ezra sighed. You do that, you'll be scraping oxygen filters out of lunar dust for weeks. Let's not get messy. He paused, softer now. Come on, Commander. Let's have a civil conversation. Minutes later, the hatch signaled external pressure. The widows stood in silent formation, light dimmed in caution. Ezra looked at them and whispered, "Let me handle it. Trust me." The door opened with a hiss. 3 humans stepped through, suits polished, badges gleaming. Hayes was at the front, tall, pale, with eyes sharp as glass. She scanned the room, gaze catching on the luminous figures. "Unregistered entities confirmed," she said, voice like a blade. "You've violated containment protocols, Mr. Johnson." Ezra crossed his arms. "I've offered shelter to survivors. That used to mean something to humans. They are unknown species. We cannot verify intent or biology. You could be endangering the entire colony network." "Funny," Ezra said dryly. "The only danger I see is arrogance wearing a uniform." Hayes' jaw tightened. "You will transfer custody of these individuals immediately." Serene stepped forward, the faint light from her body reflecting in Hayes' visor. Her voice rang out, layered and melodic. "We seek no conflict. Only breath, only warmth." Hollis translated, but the sound of Seren's tone carried its own meaning. The room seemed to pulse with her emotion, grief and dignity braided together. Hayes blinked, momentarily thrown off. "You're using emotional resonance. Manipulation tactics won't—" Ezra cut her off. "That's not manipulation, Commander. That's what truth sounds like when words ain't enough." The 2 locked eyes, silence stretching taut. Around them, the widows began to hum softly, a low harmonic wave filling the dome. It wasn't a threat, it was plea, a sound that carried the weight of 1,000 broken homes. Hayes raised a hand, but her second officer hesitated. "Commander," he said quietly, "it doesn't feel hostile." Ezra took a step closer. "These women lost everything, same as plenty of us did back in the expansion wars. You remember those stories, don't you? Folks fleeing planets, begging for shelter, being turned away by their own kind?" Hayes' eyes flickered just for a moment. "History doesn't excuse disobedience." "Maybe not," Ezra replied, voice calm but firm. "But compassion does." Behind him, Seren reached out, her glowing hand brushing the air near Hayes. The commander stiffened, but didn't step back. Her reflection shimmered in the widow's light. 2 beings staring across centuries of fear. For a heartbeat, the tension eased. Then Hayes exhaled sharply. "You've made your point, Mr. Johnson, but my orders stand. I'll file my report." Ezra nodded. "Do what you gotta do. But when you write it, tell them what you saw, people, not threats." She paused, studying him. "You still believe in that after all this time?" "Every day I wake up breathing," he said. "Is proof I should." Hayes turned away, motioning for her officers. "We'll be in contact." When the hatch closed, Ezra leaned against the console, heart heavy but defiant. The widows gathered around him, their glow returning slowly. Seren's tone was soft. "You spoke with fire." Ezra gave a weary grin. "Yeah. But now the smoke's coming." Outside, the stars burned steady, indifferent witnesses to what compassion might cost. The silence after the inspectors left felt heavier than their presence had. Ezra sat by the comm console, the taste of recycled air bitter on his tongue. The widows lingered near the greenhouse, their light subdued, movements cautious. Even without translation, he could feel their unease pressing through the air like a storm waiting to break. "They'll come back," he said quietly. "People like Hayes don't walk away without finishing the job." Seren stepped closer, her glow faintly pulsing with calm determination. Hollis translated her harmonic tone. "Then we must make them listen before they return." Ezra gave a tired laugh. "You think words are enough?" "They built walls between stars," she said through Hollis. "We will build bridges." He leaned back in the chair, studying her. The conviction in her voice reminded him of Amara, of his father, of every protest march he'd watched from the sidewalks of Atlanta as a boy. Voices raised not to fight but to be heard. He rubbed his temples. "All right, Seren. Suppose we do try." "How?" Seren turned toward the others. Their bodies brightened in synchronized rhythm, pulses of light rippling across the room. Hollis adjusted frequencies, decoding their melody into speech. "We will teach. Share what is inside us. You will share what is inside you." Ezra frowned. You're talking about culture, story, music, memory, Seren added softly. The proof of life. For the next hours, the homestead transformed into something Ezra hadn't seen in decades, a place alive with creation. The widows arranged crystals from their damaged vessel around the common room. When activated, each crystal emitted faint light and tone, harmonizing with the hum of the station's old systems. Ezra brought out his djembe and the cracked speakers that once played Coltrane. Together, they layered rhythm and resonance, building a bridge of sound between worlds. Hollis recorded everything, transmitting fragments into the colony network under an open frequency. Ezra titled the broadcast Hearth Testimony 1. It wasn't politics, it was a plea for empathy. He cleared his throat before speaking into the recorder. This is Ezra Johnson, outpost keeper on Kepler 442D4. I'm sending a message, not of defiance, but of understanding. If you're human, you know what it means to lose, to hurt, to hope. These 12 beings you fear, they're not invaders. They're reflections of who we used to be when we still believed in each other. He paused, hands trembling slightly. We forgot that survival isn't just breathing, it's belonging. Out here, we either learn that again or fade into the dust. When he stopped, the widows began to hum, a slow, rising harmony that seemed to cradle his words. Hollis amplified the sound, broadcasting the combined voices far beyond the moon. After the message sent, Ezra leaned against the console, exhausted but lighter. You think anyone will hear? Seren's glow softened to a golden hue. Sound travels farther than fear. 2 days passed. The comboard flickered constantly with messages, miners, colonists, old friends from stations long forgotten. Most were short, hesitant. Heard you, brother. You're right. Others sent fragments of songs, prayers, even recipes. The galaxy was listening. Ezra read everyone, tears threatening, but never falling. Would you look at that? He whispered. They still remember what it means to be human. The widow's hum filled the air, warmer now like sunlight through dust. Later that night, while adjusting the transmitter, Ezra caught his reflection in the glass, older, weathered, but alive. He thought of all the bridges that had carried his ancestors through centuries of struggle, faith, rhythm, community. Maybe this was just another crossing, different stars, same soul. He turned to Hollis. Log the next message. Title it, Hearth Accord Proposal. Let's see if kindness can still make policy. As he began drafting the first lines, the widow's harmonies deepened around him, a pulse of shared purpose binding them tighter. For the first time since Amara's death, Ezra felt not alone, but part of something vast and alive, something that might just change the shape of the stars themselves. The warning came as a low vibration through the floor, subtle at first, then growing into a steady tremor that rattled the greenhouse frames. Hollis's voice broke through the static, tense and urgent. Magnetic storm approaching from the southern hemisphere. Estimated impact 17 minutes. Ezra dropped his wrench. That fast? Hollis shut down non-essential systems. Secure the solar fields. Processing. Structural integrity risk? Critical. The widows gathered near the viewport, their glow flickering erratically under the charged air. Seren's tone wavered with concern, the translator catching fragments. The sky hums like anger. What is happening? Storm, Ezra said, pulling on his jacket. Not wind, electrical. Sheer waves from the planet's magnetosphere. If we don't stabilize the grid, this dome will go dark. He moved quickly through the corridors, adjusting power feeds, rerouting current. The air grew dense with ozone, lights flickering as the first waves hit. Dust lifted from the floor, dancing in ghostly spirals. The widows followed, their resonance deepening to steady the vibration around them. Hollis analyzed it instantly. They are generating counter-frequency, stabilizing interior pressure. Ezra spared a glance over his shoulder. Keep it up, then. You're helping more than you know. He reached the main control board, fingers flying across manual toggles. Warning lights flared red. Power surged and fell in sick pulses like a dying heart. "Come on, old girl," he muttered to the station. "Don't quit on me now." Outside, the storm descended. Lightning without thunder spread across the horizon, painting the surface in pale fire. Each flash sent another surge through the circuits. The hydroponic glass trembled, threatening to crack. Seren approached him, her form glowing bright against the darkness. "Your shelter weakens," her voice rang through Hollis. "We can strengthen it together." Ezra's breath caught. "What are you talking about?" "The resonance between your machines and our song. It can align. But you must trust us." He hesitated only a moment. "Do it." The widows moved in a circle around the central reactor, their bodies humming in unison. The tone began low, then rose in layers, harmonic frequencies merging with the generator's pulse. The light stabilized, flickering back to life in golden waves. Hollis's voice trembled. Power output restored. Atmospheric balance within safe range. Ezra exhaled, sweat beading across his brow. "You beautiful miracles." The floor shook again, harder this time. A violent surge struck the outer fields, and a blinding arc of energy burst through one of the conduits. Sparks rained across the control deck. Ezra jumped back, shielding his face. "Containment breach," Hollis warned. "Manual override required." Ezra dashed forward, grabbing the emergency lever. The metal was scorching hot. He gritted his teeth, pulling with all his strength. His hands burned, but the flow steadied, the hum deepening into something almost musical. When the systems finally held, he stumbled back, chest heaving. The widow's glow dimmed, but their harmonies lingered, echoing softly through the dome. The storm outside raged on, yet within the homestead, calm pulsed like a heartbeat. Ezra looked down at his blistered palms, flexing them painfully. "That's going to sting in the morning," he muttered. Serene approached, her voice low and resonant. "Pain means you are still of life." He managed a half smile. "Yeah, it surely does." Hours passed before the last of the storm faded. The lunar sky settled into its usual stillness, the silence heavy but whole. Ezra checked the systems twice, confirming stability. Then finally he sat. The widows rested nearby, faintly luminous, their hum replaced by slow, even breaths. Ezra felt the exhaustion hit him, muscle, bone, and something deeper. He looked around the room that had nearly become their tomb and let out a long sigh. "Hollis," he said quietly, "log this day. Call it the night we all held together." The AI paused, its tone softened. "Logged." Ezra leaned back, eyelids heavy, whispering to the quiet room. "Guess this moon finally learned how to sing." And just before sleep took him, a faint crackle returned through the comms, a message trying to break through the static, carrying voices not yet known. Ezra woke to the sound of his own ragged breathing. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy and still, but every muscle in his body screamed with fatigue. His palms burned where the conduit had seared his skin. When he tried to stand, the room tilted, the world sliding sideways. Hollis's voice cut through the haze, distant, almost gentle. "Vital signs unstable. Sit, Ezra." He managed a weak chuckle. "You sound worried." "I do not worry," the AI replied, "but you are important to this structure." "Structure," he murmured. "That's a cold word for family." Before he could fall again, light gathered at the edge of his vision, soft pulses moving toward him. The widows. Seren knelt beside him, her glow trembling like candlelight. Hollis translated her tone into words so calm they almost sounded human. "You have given your heat to save us. Now we return it." Ezra tried to protest, but Seren's hand hovered over his chest. A low hum spread through the room, joined by the harmonies of the others. Their light brightened in rhythm, flowing across his body like water. Heat flooded his skin, seeping deep into the pain until it softened into something bearable. He exhaled shakily. That's something else." "They call it resonance healing," Hollis explained. "They align their frequency with your heart rhythm." Ezra closed his eyes, letting the warmth sink in. Beneath the hum, another sound rose, low, steady, familiar. Amara's voice, or maybe just the memory of it. "Don't be afraid of living again, Ez. Even broken things still shine when the light finds them right. He whispered into the still air, "Miss you, baby." Seren's hum wavered, softer now. "You speak to one unseen," came the translation. "My wife," he said, barely above a breath. "Been gone a long time, but she's here somehow." In this, he gestured weakly toward their circle, in the noise between heartbeats. The widows continued their song, gentler now. Ezra felt his pulse slow, steadier with each note. For a brief moment, it was as if his heartbeat and their harmonies had become the same rhythm, two worlds breathing together. When the light finally dimmed, he felt clearer, tired still, but alive. Seren's glow flickered faintly. Even she looked drained. "You should rest now," she said through Hollis. Ezra nodded. "Guess I don't get to argue with 12 healers." They helped him to his chair, wrapping a blanket over his shoulders. The air was warmer now, filled with traces of ozone and faint sweetness. Outside, the lunar dust had settled into silence. Hollis updated the system logs quietly. "Energy reserves stable. Habitat integrity restored. You are fortunate." Ezra looked toward the sleeping widows who now rested in a cluster near the heater, their bodies faintly luminous in rhythm with the hum of the homestead. "No," he said softly. "I'm blessed." He sat back, exhaustion tugging at the edge of his thoughts. The quiet pressed in again, but it wasn't empty. It was alive with presence, the whisper of airflow, the steady beat of the generator, the faint murmuring of the widows as they dreamed. His eyes wandered to the old record player. Without thinking, he reached out and set it spinning. The needle caught, crackled, then released a soft melody into the air. Miles Davis again, low and mournful. Seren stirred at the sound. "This music, it sounds like what we did for you," she murmured through Hollis. Ezra smiled faintly. "Yeah, that's jazz for you. It knows how to heal what words can't." They listened together, the last notes fading into the pulse of machinery. Ezra's eyelids grew heavy, but before sleep claimed him, he whispered a promise to the quiet room. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll make it count. I'll make it all mean something." And somewhere deep inside the homestead, between two heartbeats, the moon itself seemed to answer in rhythm. When Ezra woke, the light inside the homestead had changed. The soft glow of morning filtered through the greenhouse, golden and alive. The air smelled faintly of mint and warm soil. He sat up slowly, his body still sore but his spirit lighter, as if something deep within had been reset. The widows were already awake, tending the plants, their light pulsing in gentle rhythm with the hum of the air system. Hollis's voice reported quietly, "Hydroponic yield increased by 18%, oxygen balance optimal. The habitat has never been this efficient." Ezra chuckled. "Guess that storm didn't just shake us, it woke us up." Seren turned, her voice smooth through the translator. "The storm took what was weak and left what could endure. This is the way of renewal." Ezra rubbed his chin, considering that. "On Earth, we used to say the same thing after hurricanes. Folks would rebuild, stronger, prouder. Guess pain and growth always come holding hands." The widows hummed softly, a resonance that blended with the faint buzz of the solar arrays outside. Their bodies seemed brighter today, no longer pale with fear. They moved with quiet confidence, cleaning, repairing, reorganizing. Where cracks had formed in the dome, they sealed them with a crystalline compound from their ship. The material shimmered faintly under the light, alien but beautiful. Ezra couldn't help smiling. "You've turned my home into something finer than the Federation ever built." One of the younger widows, her glow more blue than gold, looked up from the heater. Hollis translated her soft tone. "You built it first. We only healed what was waiting to live." That struck him deep. He looked around at what they'd made together. The homestead no longer felt like an aging relic or a tomb of memory. It breathed, alive, renewed, a harmony of human steel and Ophiri light. Later that day, as they shared a meal, his cornbread and greens mixed with their iridescent herbs, Ezra found himself laughing, really laughing. The sound startled even him. The widows looked on with delight, their harmonies rising in amusement that rippled through the room like wind over water. "You know," Ezra said between breaths, "I can't remember the last time I felt like this. Feels like Sunday supper after church back home." Seren tilted her head. "Church? A place where folks gather to remember they belong to something bigger than themselves. Then this is church," she said simply. Ezra stared at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe it is." Hollis interrupted softly. "Incoming message traffic has increased. Multiple civilian networks broadcasting references to your transmissions. Word spreading about a Hearth Accord." Ezra leaned forward. "You serious?" "Affirmative. Independent settlements across 3 sectors have begun drafting sanctuary charters modeled after your proposal." He felt his heartbeat quicken. "So they heard us. They actually heard us." Seren's light glowed brighter. "A bridge built by song can carry many feet." He smiled at her phrasing. "Then we better keep singing." For hours the widows and Ezra worked together, refining their shared systems, crafting a sustainable rhythm between technology and biology. He found himself teaching them earth songs while they taught him their tonal language. The harmonies filled the dome until even the AI reduced its processing noise to listen. As the lunar evening deepened, Ezra sat by the viewport. The stars hung brilliant and clear, and the reflection of the homestead shone back, a pulse of warmth on a dead moon. He spoke softly to the silence. "Amara, you'd love this place now. It's got soul again." Behind him, Seren answered gently, "She is still here." "Every song carries the ones we loved." Ezra turned to her, his eyes tired but bright. "Yeah," he whispered, "I feel that." Outside, the stars blinked steady, and the hum of the hearth grew stronger, a sound not of survival, but of life truly beginning. The message came at dusk. Hollis announced it in a tone Ezra had never heard before, almost reverent. "Incoming transmission from the Federation Council. Priority 1. Ezra froze mid-step, a wrench in his hand. The widows paused too, their glow softening in quiet alertness. "Put it through," he said finally. Static filled the room before a familiar voice cut through, the cool precision of Commander Hayes. But this time her tone carried something different. "Ezra Mbeki Johnson, this is Commander Hayes speaking on behalf of the Council. Your broadcast, what you called the Hearth Accord, has reached every settlement in 3 sectors. The Council has taken notice." Ezra raised an eyebrow. "Taken notice, huh? That sounds like the fancy way of saying you don't know what to do with it." There was a pause. "Perhaps," she admitted, "but we cannot ignore it. The testimonies, the cultural bridges, it's spreading faster than any official initiative we've attempted in decades. People are asking why they've never heard voices like yours before." Seren stepped closer, her light shimmering softly. "She speaks with conflict inside," Hollis translated. Ezra smiled faintly. "You're not wrong, Seren." Then, into the comm, "So what's the Council planning to do?" "Send another team to shut me up." Hayes hesitated. "No. The Council proposes to formalize your initiative, to create a network of sanctuaries modeled after your outpost. We are calling it the Hearth Accord, as you named it." Ezra blinked, disbelief flickering across his face. "You're serious?" "Completely," Hayes said. "But there are conditions. The Ophiri survivors will need to participate under monitored cultural exchange protocols, and you'll act as liaison." Ezra laughed, deep and warm. "You mean the old man on the moon's got himself a job again?" "Something like that," Hayes replied, and for the first time he could hear the hint of a smile in her voice. The widows began to hum, soft waves of resonance filling the space. Seren's tone rose above the others. "They will allow us to stay?" Hollis translated, and Ezra nodded. "They will. And more than that. They're going to listen this time." The sound that followed wasn't exactly laughter, but it was joy. Their harmonies turned bright, echoing against the metal walls like sunrise breaking through stone. Ezra felt the vibration in his chest, grounding him in something vast and human. When the call ended, he stood for a long moment in silence. Then he turned to Hollis. "Log that one, partner. Call it The day the world remembered how to speak. Logged, the AI replied almost softly. That night the homestead glowed brighter than it ever had. The widows worked with Ezra, tuning the communication relays for the council's new network. They called it the Bridge of 12 Suns, a poetic nod to their home star and to the 12 voices that had turned exile into sanctuary. As the final link activated, messages began pouring in. Children from distant colonies sent recordings of their laughter. Musicians offered songs. Storytellers sent tales of their ancestors. Humans and non-humans alike spoke into the vast quiet, filling the void with meaning again. Ezra sat back, overwhelmed. "This," he murmured, "this is what Amara dreamed of. A place where nobody's a stranger." Seren touched his shoulder, her light warm as breath. "You gave the universe back its echo." He chuckled softly. Didn't give it back, just reminded it how to hum. Hours later, as the widows sang in gentle harmony, the first official message from the council appeared on the screen, a declaration in clean, bold text. All beings seeking refuge and cultural exchange are welcome under the Hearth Accord. Ezra read it twice before whispering, "We did it." Seren's reply came through the translator, quiet and steady. "No, Ezra Johnson, we sang it." He leaned back, the hum of the homestead blending with their light, and for the first time in decades, the stars outside didn't seem so far away. The days that followed were quiet in a way Ezra hadn't known in years. Not empty, but full. The homestead thrummed with new energy. Messages from across colonies arrived daily, carrying songs, recipes, prayers, and stories. Humanity and the Ophiri had started weaving a tapestry of shared memory, thread by luminous thread. Ezra spent most mornings in the greenhouse, his burned hands wrapped and healing. The widows had insisted on tending his work for him, though he still hovered nearby, offering advice he pretended they needed. The okra plants had grown taller, greener than ever. "Guess they like your music better than mine," he told Seren one day, watching her hum softly over the soil. "They grow because the air listens now," she replied through Hollis. "When beings share breath in harmony, life answers." Ezra smiled, touched by the poetry in her words. "I'll have to remember that." But time, he realized, had its own rhythm. His body tired faster these days, his hands trembled more when he worked. He brushed it off, telling himself it was age and nothing more. Still, when he looked out the viewport at night, he caught his reflection, older, thinner, but content. The universe at last had learned to listen. That evening he sat before the recorder. The widows gathered quietly around, their glow soft and steady. "All right," he said, clearing his throat. "Let's make this official. Hollis, new entry. Title, The Last Song." "Recording," the AI confirmed. Ezra leaned closer to the microphone. "This is Ezra Mbeki Johnson, caretaker of the homestead. If you're hearing this, it means you're part of something that started small, just a handful of lost souls sharing warmth on a cold moon. But look at us now. We've turned silence into music." He paused, breath trembling slightly. "When I was a boy, my daddy used to tell me that the blues weren't about sadness. They were about survival. They were a way to say, 'I'm still here.' Well, that's what this place is. A hymn made of hope." Seren stepped forward, her light pulsing gently as if to answer him. The others followed, their harmonies rising in slow layered tones. Ezra nodded, smiling. "That's right," he whispered. "Sing it with me." Their voices filled the dome, sound and light interwoven, wrapping around him like a living embrace. Hollis adjusted the frequencies, capturing every vibration. The melody built and broke, carrying grief and joy in equal measure. Ezra closed his eyes. In the rhythm he saw his father polishing that trumpet, saw Amara smiling against the glow of old Earth sunlight. He felt the pulse of 1,000 generations beating through him. Humanity, he thought, had never been about perfection. It had always been about persistence, the stubborn will to keep creating beauty, even when surrounded by ruin. When the final note faded, he sat back, tears tracing silent lines down his face. "That'll do," he murmured. Oh, that's the sound I want to leave behind. Seren knelt beside him, her tone barely above a whisper. The stars will carry your song, Ezra Johnson. He chuckled softly. Long as someone's listening, I'm good. Later that night, he made one last walk around the homestead. The air smelled of life, earth, steam, faint sweetness. Every hum and creak of the place felt like music now. When he returned to his chair, fatigue settled over him, but it wasn't the kind that begged to be fought. It felt like peace. Hollis spoke quietly from the console. Transmission complete. Would you like to add a final note? Ezra smiled faintly. Yeah. Tell whoever's out there. Keep building, keep singing, and for heaven's sake, keep each other warm. He leaned back, eyes on the stars that burned like distant candles. The widow's soft harmonies continued, wrapping around him until his breathing matched their rhythm. And as the homestead pulsed with the echo of his last song, the moon itself seemed to hum back, carrying his melody into the endless dark. Years passed quietly on the lunar outpost, once known as the Homestead. The Federation's maps now marked it by another name, the Hearth of 12 Suns. What began as an act of defiance had become a symbol of unity, a living monument to compassion's endurance. Pilgrims of all species came to see the place where a single man and 12 alien widows had changed the meaning of survival. The settlement had grown beyond its dome. Gardens stretched across the grey dust, vibrant green against silver soil. Air sang softly through new vents. Voices of children, human and Ophiria alike, rose in laughter, their tones mingling in easy harmony. They spoke both languages now, switching between rhythm and resonance, as if the two had always belonged together. A plaque hung near the entrance, etched with simple words, Ezra Mbeki Johnson, builder of hearths, keeper of songs. Beneath it lay an old djembe, carefully sealed against time. Every evening someone would touch its worn surface before entering, as if greeting an ancestor. Seren still lived there. Her glow had softened with age, though her eyes shone as clear as ever. She walked the corridors, humming old melodies, teaching the young ones how to listen to the heartbeat of silence. When asked about Ezra, she always smiled the same way and said, "He taught us that warmth is not fire, but faith shared." Hollis remained as well, its voice calm and wise from decades of stories. System integrity, optimal, it would say when Seren checked the controls. Emotional index, peaceful. It had developed over time a tone faintly human, Ezra's cadence woven through its programming. One night, long after the new generation had gone to rest, Seren sat by the window overlooking the stars. The twin suns of Kepler 442b cast faint light across the plains. She activated the old audio recorder Ezra had used so many years before. The familiar crackle filled the room, followed by his deep, steady voice. "This is Ezra Johnson," the recording began, his accent rich with memory. "If you're hearing this, it means you found the fire we left behind. Don't let it go out. Remember, home ain't where you're born, it's where someone shares the warmth." Seren closed her eyes, listening. The words still carried heat, even after all this time. She whispered through the translator, "We remember." Across the colony, lights dimmed to night mode. The rhythm of life slowed. But within the central chamber, the hearth continued to glow, a mix of human engineering and Ophiri resonance, pulsing like a living heart. The walls sang softly, the frequencies merging into a lullaby older than both species. Children often said they could hear Ezra's voice in that hum. Some swore that when the dome cooled at dusk, the wind carried the sound of laughter and drumbeats. The elders never corrected them. Truth, they had learned, didn't always need proof, it only needed faith. Each year, on the anniversary of the Accord, the settlers gathered outside under the stars. They played recordings of jazz and Ophiri chant, blending into a single song. Old and young would dance, their feet stirring the dust that had once known only silence. The moon that had been Ezra's exile had become a place of communion, a reminder that love, once offered, never truly faded. At the festival's close, Seren would step forward and place her hands on the plaque. Her voice, though faint, carried clear. He said warmth would outlive him. He was right. Then she would lift her eyes toward the stars and whisper, "Rest easy, Elder Hearth. the fires still burning. Above them, the twin suns rose together, painting the sky gold and blue. The song of the hearth rose with them, steady, endless, alive. Subscribe for more human stories among the stars and click the next journey on screen to keep the fire alive.